Welcome to podcast 142. It's a stressful day at Wiggly Wigglers because we're not putting a new system in. I'm Heather.
I'm Richard.
And I'm Farmer Phil.
We were due to go live with our new system yesterday, but it's gone dead. It has died. So we're just in a limbo moment of puzzlement. If you are a mail order company who has successfully implemented a new system with products, options, SKUs, stock control, and now data analysis, crystal reports, and it all went swimmingly, give us a ring. You know, emotional support is greatly needed at Wiggly Wigglers.
Alternatively, my impression is that a couple of bottles of wine clarifies the situation perfectly.
Yes, this is Heather talking to you after 2 bottles of rosé last evening.
Right.
And Rach has took the ultimate step and gone for a trip to the Royal Welsh Show today.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Is she? She gone out there today? Terry's doing his talk today. I should tell her.
Oh, ring her up.
I'll ring her on mobile.
That's it.
Apparently
on a Mobley.
yesterday they had the most fantastic attendance. It was packed out. There were queues to get in just because they'd got huge numbers of people, which I think is really good because the Royal Show, as you know, at Stoneleigh took a right caning the other day because nobody went. It was raining, which didn't help. But it's interesting, the Royal Welsh has always been a successful show and seems to continue to be.
Just explain what the Royal Welsh Show is.
The Royal
What's the
Welsh
idea?
Show is what it says, essentially. It's the Wales National Agricultural Show. It includes a lot of non-agricultural things as well, but it's just a traditional county show and some, if you like. It's got everything, and people flock for miles to come to it. It's
JCBs.
got machinery, animals, horse competitions, you name it, lumberjack competitions, the
Ice
whole
cream.
bit.
It is a brilliant show. I went up there Tuesday to do a talk, but I didn't have time to look around much, really, because it was so hot as well. I got in that marquee, and the horticultural marquee, and honestly, the sweat was dripping off me. As though someone had
Lovely. I think
Dark.
that's a
What a
bit
bucket
more
of water off my
information than
head.
we need, really.
Anyone turn up?
Yeah, it was a nice crowd, actually. What tends to happen with shows is that you get a few people sat in front of you, and when you start talking, as people walk past, they stop and listen to what you're saying, and then they come in and sit down. So, of course, your audience
And then they
tends to-
regret it because they're
tends
stuck
to,
there for hours.
Yeah, that's right. It does to increase as you go along. So, yeah, it was really good, actually. It was well worth going along.
Right, on this week's show, we have got coming up Farmer Phil's latest claim to fame. He's been on local radio. And we've also got Lindsay, who has been composting her nappies, or more accurately, her baby's nappies, I presume.
Children's
Children. Her grandchildren, in fact.
Indeed.
Anyway, Farmer Phil, you've been on the radio because the whole week on Radio 4 and Radio 5, I have listened to reports saying that farmers are caning it in. They're going to make an absolute fortune. Wheat barons are back. Oliver Woolston was on the radio with his squillion hectares of wheat in the east of England, explaining the margins and how it worked and why would farmers have subsidy. And so I know that yesterday Farmer Phil was called into action by BBC Hereford and Worcester to put the record straight. So what spin have you spun?
I haven't spun any spin. Andrew Easton invited me on his show last night, and essentially it is inarguable that the price of wheat has gone up radically over the last 12 months, and I believe it's probably likely to go up further. But there are reasons for that, and I think that there are benefits to be had for both the consumer and the farmer. Obviously, for the farmer, if he's going to make a profit, then that's going to go some way to the fairly serious losses most of us have made over the last few years. But it should be borne in mind that a high wheat price is good for those of us who grow wheat, but those of us who's got livestock, that represents a fairly serious increase in the feed that we need to buy in, perhaps. So it's not all good news, and also, as an industry, we are subject to all the cost increases and inflation that all industries are subject to, so that the price of fuel...
Well, that's enough of that. The point is...
Well, thank you for that.
Well, the point is, isn't it, that whilst everything is going up in price, that the wheat price has gone from 60 quid to 150 quid. So, you know, with the best will in the world, you cannot say that the fuel has gone from £10 to £20.
Well, in the
come on.
last 3 years, diesel to us for the tractors has gone from 11p to 70p.
Oh, well, that's all very well, but compared to the return on your acre, that isn't really that relevant, is it?
No, but when you look at the costs involved...
Oh, let's just get to the nitty-gritty.
No, you asked for whether there was going to be a profit involved, and I think there will be a profit involved, but it's not raking it in as you suggest, that all our inputs have gone up radically, and I think there are benefits to the farmer because obviously our subsidies are coming down, as they must, and an increase in farming income will allow that to happen reasonably comfortably, and that is a good thing. I think it also provides opportunities for consumers of the produce that we produce, because if it's more expensive, the consumer will value it more, but also it'll be more in their interest to find out more about it. It allows us as farmers to differentiate. It allows us to justify the increased value of our produce, and that can only be healthy for us.
Rich?
I completely agree.
Well, I'd like to say something from the retailer's point of view, because all these years we hear what a terrible thing it is for the farmer and how they are completely at the mercy of the retailer. Now, I am a retailer, and I'd like you to know, Farmer Phil, how difficult it is to try and pass on the 4 times the price that you have passed on to me for seed. If I went back to my consumers and said, your bag of seed was £5 and now it's £20, I would have no customers. So as a retailer, it's quite interesting at the moment to see that you're not the one that gets squeezed, it's me.
Well, that's quite an interesting comment as well, because as a wholesaler to you, so that if we said that 70% of the birdseed ingredients that I sell to you, I have to buy, and I've been dealing with the increase in prices that my suppliers charge me. And it's quite a simple thing. If I don't pay the money, I don't have the product.
But why don't you grow it yourself? And also,
well, the peanut harvest in West Hereford has never been a very reliable option.
I'd just like to point out that you do grow your own sunflowers.
Absolutely.
And they've gone up 4 times the price.
Yeah, well, unsurprisingly...
In 3 months.
Exactly. But the reason for that was that I held the price while I was using my sunflowers that I grew. And when I'd sold out of my own sunflowers and I had to buy some in, I had something of a rude shock because the price had gone up ridiculously from something like £300 a tonne to something like £700 a tonne. And this caused me a fairly major hiccup in my cash flow. Now, the choice is yours. If you want sunflowers, that's how much they're going to cost. If you don't, then we won't do them.
You'll be glad to hear, dear listener, that we have not passed on Farmer Phil's extortionate increase to you, but we have increased the prices a bit. Well, we have to.
What is interesting is that another aspect of high prices is that they're much more volatile. The price will go up to a spike and come down. They're moving much more rapidly, which makes it quite interesting because one week you can sell wheat at £160 a tonne, the next week you might sell it at £130 a tonne, and this has not happened before.
So somewhere or other there's an extra load of money.
Absolutely.
Are we going to be rich?
The potential to pay off some of the overdraft is there.
Potential to pay
But-
off some of the overdraft. There's always
Well,
a say
the interesting thing is to grow your 3 tonnes an acre of wheat, then you have to use fertiliser. Fertiliser has more than doubled in the last 12 months.
Do organic farmers use fertiliser?
Organic farmers don't use fertiliser, but then they wouldn't get 3 tonnes an acre, so that the sums go round and round. The cost of metal, we've had all the stories about people stealing scrap metal and all the rest of it.
You've had a few losses recently.
I've lost my gateposts that somebody nicked off the road. But so obviously, when we're using all our machinery, the cost of that has gone up astronomically. Plough parts. Just buying the machinery in itself, the cost has gone up. Fuel we've mentioned, there's a knock-on cost. The transport of what we grow to wherever it goes, the costs have gone up logically because the lorry drivers are paying £1.30 a litre for their fuel.
So, dear supplier, looking ahead from a retailer's point of view, I'd like to think that this means that there is a shift because as transportation becomes more expensive, then it's more important to try and source in Britain.
I think you're right, and I think that also you will find that there will now be, because we've had this very rapid period of change, that there will now be a levelling off. The market may be quite volatile, but I think you'll find that there will be a correction and that it will stabilise more generally. But We can't control the markets. We're not big enough to control the markets, nor would we seek to. And it's a question of operating within them. And my view is that if things are going to be more expensive, then let's make sure we get them from the right place with the right story, whether it's food, birdseed...
And less waste, Rich?
Less waste, yeah, certainly.
You're not talking today, are you?
No, I'm just enjoying this debate. The fact that you and Phil are just chattering away and I'm just kind of listening and avoiding any possible confrontation that you might take the opportunity to incite. So yeah, you carry on. That's quite nice listening to husband and wife chattering anyway. It's quite good.
Yeah, it's time for music.
It is.
Let's go and find out about Lindsay Neal composting her grandchildren's nappies.
Indeed.
Well, I've wandered up to the edge of Dawson Hill, which I don't know, many of the listeners might not be familiar with Dawson Hill. It's very steep, isn't it?
It is very steep. There's not much flat ground in our garden either.
No, not at all, no. But that's a familiar feeling for me. But I've come up to see Lindsay Neal. And Lindsay came to see us at Wiggly's probably, 12 months ago or something?
Just a bit over a year ago.
Right, and you were very keen on composting nappies. Your daughter has a young family and they're inundated with these things that they weren't quite sure what to do with. And I think you've had a few problems with approaching people to see whether or not they were interested in the kind of project that you were doing. But, I mean, give us the lowdown. What did you do? What have you been up to?
Well, I'll tell you how it started. My daughter, I have to make it clear, my daughter is mainstream young woman. She doesn't live in a yurt. She wouldn't classify herself as an environmental warrior of any distinction at all.
Okay.
She's married to a GP. She's absolutely straight down the line.
Okay.
But it's been interesting watching her become more and more concerned about environmental impact over time.
Right.
Her first two children, she used washable nappies.
Right.
Then there was a gap between babies 1 and 2 and baby 3.
Okay.
And just before I came to see you, they were pregnant, expecting baby 3. In the time between baby 2 and baby 3, the debate about nappies had changed.
Right.
The whole thing about landfill became a much more important issue, and there were all those questions about the temperature at which you needed to wash terry nappies. And my daughter was saying to me, I'm really confused. I tried to do it this way, but actually I might be saving landfill, but I might also be, adding to my carbon footprint by having to wash these nappies at 60 degrees. So she was very, very confused. So she said to me, I tell you what, I'll have the baby, you sort out the nappies for me.
Okay, jump from mum.
Which I was very happy to do. So I got hold of a few websites and started trawling through websites, beginning to gather a little bit of information, but the information wasn't consistent.
No.
Some people were willing to respond, some people were clearly not willing to respond. We picked up a diagram of a composting nappy container.
Right.
Which my husband is more technical in these matters than I am, looked at and thought, ooh, can't see how that's going to work.
Right.
But, we wanted to know more about the principles. And then the people who had put that on a website, encouraging us all to have a look, completely shut down all communications with me.
Okay.
They were researchers, they were wanting to publish findings, and they were not prepared to share anything at all, which irritates me.
Yeah, that's a shame,
frankly.
isn't it?
It is a real shame. So then I thought, well, I've got Wiggly Wigglers down the road. I know you of old.
Right.
And I thought I'd approach you. So the first response I got from you was, nappies, no.
Well, I seem to remember you walking into the office, and I see we've got a team of women who aren't particularly maternal. So even though they have children of their own, most of which are quite kind of large now, there's not much of a maternal instinct in the office. And I remember you walking in and saying, I wonder if you guys are really interested in helping with this project.
Yeah, here I am, a granny on a mission.
Yeah.
A room full of women, and they all went like that. So that was only the first response. Was, oh my goodness,
but you did well. You broke down some barriers. I was quite impressed. I thought I was sat there behind my screen. I thought I'm not going to get involved. I'll just see how this lady gets on.
Well, I'll tell you how we break it down. Break it down in two ways. One, they said to me, well, actually, we do get phone calls, because there were people other than me who'd been picking up this information that you can compost nappies. Therefore, you need worms to do that. Therefore, you are the experts.
Yeah.
But your staff were saying, we take these phone calls and say, oh, we don't do nappies. So somebody else had already been drip feeding your consciousness about it.
I think you're right.
And secondly, we talked about composting toilets.
Right.
So I said, OK, so I got a composting toilet in my
I know,
barn.
I've seen it. It's very impressive.
Explain to me what is the difference between supporting and being perfectly comfortable with the idea of composting toilets and, going at the thought of composting nappies. So it was those two things. It was the fact that several somebodies had been phoning you over a period of time asking, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
So there was a consciousness raising already going on amongst your team.
Certainly.
And then when challenged by somebody walking into the office and saying, so what are you going to do about this?
Yeah.
And having a conversation about the difference between a composting nappy and a composting toilet, and actually there is no difference. And I have to say, since then, you've been the heroes, because I've tried getting other organisations involved, and it's been very, very difficult.
Right. It's kind of alien notion to a lot of people. I think people are put off by the idea as much as anything else. Like possibly the consensus of Wiggly's initially when you walked in, there's kind of, that's really disgusting. Why on earth would you want to bother doing something like that? But logistically, it's probably quite tricky.
Well, I think you can take it at two levels. I have to say that my GP son-in-law started off with, over my dead body will we be composting our child's nappies. So he's moved a long way.
Evidently, yeah.
But he needed the science to convince him that it was going to be safe.
Right.
Do you really think I'm going to put this stuff on my tomatoes?
Yeah,
yes?
sure.
And so we had to find the evidence that reassured him that it would be fine.
Right.
But there are two ways of dealing with this, I think. The first is, the desirable is to do the actual composting. Now, very, very few individuals are going to be in a position to do that because they don't want to, because it costs money to build these things. To find a composting, a system for composting nappies has not been cheap or easy to work out.
No.
And very, very few people have the space, literally, the physical space.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you just the volume of nappies that Edward, who is now just over a year old, has produced in the first 12 months of his life. And there's a lot of them.
I bet
there
it's
is
huge.
A lot of them.
I mean, what quantity of nappies are you talking about over that period?
I would have to ask Fiona about numbers of nappies. They're more frequent when they're very young.
Right.
But it's more urine when
Okay. I see.
So it changes.
Right,
the content changes.
Yeah, that's right.
Over a period of time. It brings quite literally to home the impact of disposable nappies on landfill.
Right.
Because you read numbers like, I probably get the numbers wrong, 8 million nappies go to landfill every month or every week. It's vast quantities. Those numbers are so large, they don't mean anything to you.
No.
But if you want to try, some of your listeners, they might want to try collecting nappies, ordinary disposable nappies, for a week.
Right.
And just
get some sort of idea of the volume. Yeah. Because they're bulky old things, aren't they?
They are bulky, they are very bulky. So composting your own nappies is a problem because of space and a variety of other things.
So how do they manage to deal with that kind of volume then? What sort of space have they got available to them in order for them to have sufficient storage for such bulky items?
Well, fond grandparents, they think about, what are we going to buy the new grandchild? And, they've got a pram, or maybe they'd like an investment in something or other. And I don't know, maybe we could start saving for a wonderful holiday when they're 21. We put our money into plywood, marine ply, 4x4s and various other things, and built Edward a nappy composting bin.
That's very decent of you.
Which I'm sure as he gets older, he will be delighted when his friends have grandparents who have done other things for them.
Yeah, sure.
Edward,
buy them a car and set up a trust fund or something like that.
Exactly.
No?
Edward's got a nappy composting. We've got 2 bins. We've got 2 composting bins. And I think the question really is, even for that one child, and some families have more than one child in nappies over the same period of time.
Right.
You don't have to have twins to have 2 lots of people in nappies, 2 lots of babies in nappies.
No.
That actually we didn't get the dimensions right. It's suffered a bit from that, but it has worked. And I have here. I'm just going to tap a plastic bag.
Yes, let's have a look. So what have you got? So you've got a whole bunch of photographs in there. They've kindly given me a couple of newspaper cuttings, which will be very useful, I think.
This is crinkle, crinkle, crinkle for sound effects. So what I've got here is, I'm going to put
this is the end product.
Yes, and this is 12 months.
Right.
Afterwards. There was something else that I wanted to say, because I don't want people to think that if you can't compost them yourself, you can't do anything.
Okay.
Because the big thing that everybody can do is to shift from those main brand disposable nappies that have absolutely no biodegradable,
Right.
you can buy disposable nappies that have a high component of biodegradable materials in them.
Okay.
Now, that's what I would urge people to do.
Certainly.
I'm not saying to people, go out there, get your marine ply and build yourself 2 compost bins, because most people are not going to want to do that.
No.
Will be able to do that.
Well, it's the space as well, isn't it?
It's the space, it's the thinking about it, it's the worrying about what's going on in there. You know, are the rats going for it?
Were the rats going for it?
Well,
Are there any
at
problems
one
with rats?
time, yeah. Well, rats are curious, aren't they?
Yeah, they are
You know?
curious, yeah. I suppose it's kind of warm with all that
And it's warm.
cladding and
what do
insulation
you-
and whatnot.
Exactly. And what do you do in the winter? Do you wrap it in a duvet? There are all sorts of practical things.
Yeah.
But for people who simply can't do that for a variety of reasons, what people can do is to check for the biodegradable materials in the nappies, in the disposable nappies that they are buying. They will find, I'm not going to mention brands, but I can tell you now that the main brands have absolutely no biodegradable materials in them.
Right, okay.
There are others that do, and some supermarkets sell them. But Mothercare, not in every store, but Mothercare now have a nappy system, which is a huge improvement on old style.
Right.
Because I think that the manufacturers of the main brands are going to catch up with the fact that people like us are very concerned about our contributions to landfill through nappies. We are not going to change our... In my day, you were quite proud to hang your terry nappies out on the line. It's never going to go back to that in any noticeable numbers. The majority... Not just in this country, but everywhere you go in the world, disposable nappies are the norm.
Right.
But we can do something. We can do a lot, which is to force the main producers to increase the percentage of biodegradable materials that they use.
Okay.
And that's what I would urge people to do.
All right.
The composting in your own home is a great fun thing if you've got the right people involved. But it's not to everybody's, I was going to say taste, but I shan't bother with it. So here we have...
For want of a better word. Okay.
For want of a better word.
Okay. Well, it's looking rather good, isn't it?
Yeah, and so we
Very
can
dark.
see... Yeah. Okay, have a sniff.
No smell. I can't smell.
No, it smells like soil.
Can't smell anything. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It smells like soil. So what we've got here, I dug down deep the last time I was visiting.
So that's pure nappies then, really?
This is, yes, there will be, in here there'll be some of the starter coir that we got from you.
Oh, right, yeah.
There
I
might
can see
be
a worm, I can see an egg as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I see several worms actually, and little worms as well, so they're obviously thriving in there, yeah.
So what I wanted to be able to do is to let you see what this process produced 12 months afterwards. So I had to dig down, as you can imagine. That was fun.
Yeah. But it does look like it's a finished thing.
It's a
It's a reasonable,
and what we have
reasonable
got,
looking compost. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's friable,
wet.
but it's
it's wet.
getting there.
It's wet, and if we were to dry it,
it wouldn't be difficult to incorporate into a garden, would it?
Not at all. Not at all. So my son-in-law's concerned about putting this on his tomatoes. Completely unfounded.
Ideal, yes. What a shame to waste it.
I'll take it back to them, or I could give it to you.
Isn't it the most sensible thing in the world to do, though, to be able to turn our waste, our excrement, our children's excrement into food stuff that we're in turn going to kind of eat and enjoy and grow from.
It seems to me the most
process, isn't it?
Quite apart from it being fun. It's generated loads of interesting and entertaining conversations, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Family, we're not scientists, we're fairly ordinary, mainstream people, aware, as the vast majority of the population are aware of certain things.
Yeah.
And, landfill and nappies is one of them.
Fabulous. So this chunky stuff now on the top. Oh, okay.
What
so
we can see is the stuff that hasn't broken down, that will break down eventually.
Right.
Although I don't
and
think
how
these
long's that been in there?
This is 12 months.
Right, okay, so that's...
So I went looking. See the size of this? This is a newborn's nappy size.
Right.
Okay, so I dug down into the first of the 2 bins.
Okay.
And I got up some of the compost.
Yeah.
And I got the residue. I got the stuff that... I think these sticky tabs, people who are familiar with...
there's quite a lot of plastic in those, isn't there?
Yeah. With disposable nappies, know that you have these little Velcro tabs.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look to me as though they are going to compost down. They look as good as they were when the nappy was first put on.
500 years there, I think.
I'd have thought so.
Yeah.
I'd have thought so. But everything else, you've got the fabric that holds the nappy stuff together.
It is deteriorating, isn't it?
Slowly. It
It looks a bit like a large tea bag.
It does. That's right, actually. Yes,
so,
I hadn't thought of that,
and it's probably this material. Is probably something similar.
Yeah.
It's a kind of woven sort of plastic polymer kind of thing, isn't it?
It is.
I see. Yeah. So it obviously is deteriorating, but I think there's probably a few years ahead of it yet.
There is. I'm
But
convinced.
the bulk of it's gone, hasn't it? It is very flaccid. You know, it's not got much guts anymore. So
no, the plastic tabs I don't think are ever going to go. But the substance, the content of the nappies, so the gubbins is in the middle, have turned into this rather delightful stuff.
Fabulous. So are they glad they did it anyway? Are they pleased with what they've achieved?
My daughter's delighted. My daughter's delighted. My son his sense of humour is of the cynical type.
Okay, yeah.
But he's been basically the one who trudges up to the top of the garden when the weather's been terrible and puts the nappies in there. So he's been, without him it would not have taken place. But I think it suited him to be the cynic on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But if he hadn't thought it was not safe as a doctor, if he had thought it was a fairly ludicrous thing for a family like them to get involved in, he would, I'm sure, have said no.
I'm sure you're probably
and
right.
he hasn't
well,
said.
You kind of imagine that would be the case.
Yes, it could not have been driven through. Even before my daughter suggested that they have the baby and I do the nappies, they would have talked it through. And he obviously thought it was well worth the experiment, and I don't think they're disappointed with it at all.
Brilliant.
Can I mention my friend in Limpopo? I do quite a lot of work in Limpopo, which is the northern province in South Africa.
Okay.
And it's absolutely nothing to do with worms, completely and absolutely nothing to do with worms. But I went off for a drive with some friends one weekend when I was out there. We stopped off at a garden centre,
right,
where they do fantastic waffles and ice cream.
Okay.
And the people I was with knew the people who ran the garden centre, and we were admiring their things and so on. And the chap said, this worm compost that I put on is making all the difference. I said, what? Worms compost? Well, to cut a long story short, we are in regular contact. I'm going out to Limpopo in a couple of weeks' time, and I shall make a point of going up and checking on how they're doing.
Okay.
And what they do there is that they have a huge scheme. I mean, much, much bigger than, your ordinary composting nappies. And they use farm manure, mainly cattle.
Yeah.
And they have a large system which they have constructed, and they've brought in worms, a different variety of worms from the ones that you use.
Okay.
But these little characters are incredibly efficient.
Right.
And within 6 months, they have dried worm casts, I think you would probably call it.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And they sell them in bags, and you sprinkle small quantities on your veggies or your roses or whatever.
Yeah.
And the word is that it makes the most astonishing difference. It's a much more efficient use of cow manure.
Okay.
In South Africa, where soil is quite often poor and people are struggling to produce the food that they need to produce for a variety of reasons, introducing this into village communities is something that, as a sideline, we're going to be doing, which I think is really exciting, because the raw materials are there, and these worms produce at such a rate, as you know, they're prolific reproducers.
Yeah.
Once you've got a little bit, you can hand them around. It costs you nothing. I have taken from this guy, Laurie Railton, he has given me boxes of worms, and I've been giving them to friends who've started up their own composting things, whether they're using kitchen materials or whether they're using, a lot of them have got farms or whatever. And it's really gathering momentum, and
Wonderful.
I think it's quite exciting.
That's very exciting, yeah.
Kind of global worm network.
Brilliant. Well, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us.
So, on next week's show, Rich, we're going to hear from Sue, who's in Usk.
Sue contacted you a while ago, didn't she? Sue Webber, who I met about 3.5 years ago when I went down to Usk to give the gardening club a talk. One of the first talks I gave when I came to work with you.
What are we going to find out about?
Sue is a member of the Usk Conservation and Environment Group, and one of the main reasons they all get together is to improve the wildlife environment in their beautiful town of Usk, which is a beautiful town, isn't it? It's gorgeous.
And she's a podcast listener.
And she loves a podcast. So she said in her email to you originally, I listen to your podcast every week while toiling away on the allotment. I think you're all great, and Heather's just plain mad.
Oh.
So there you are.
Well, I don't know whether we'll go to her next week, but probably we will. Right, it's goodbye from Blakemere. Farmer Phil has to go now because he's going combining his...
grass seed, hopefully, with a bit of luck.
Very good. And Ricardo, what are you up to?
I've got to go and inspect the wildlife trail for our open day on Sunday.
Brilliant.
I've got to go and see
And put the green and red
little
signs
Hannah.
up.
Green and red arrows.
Yes, very
with
good.
my trusty staple gun. So, yeah.
So thank you for listening. Thank you very much indeed. You've been with us for ages, unless you're new. And if you've got a chance to go and put a review on iTunes, do that. And because we've got a new one, but we'll hear that next week. Bye from me, Heather Wiggly Wigglers, signing off on a beautiful July day.
And bye-bye from me.
And bye from me.